All right, we are live with the very first This Week in Israel Tech, and I'm super excited for our guest, Tal from StageOne VC. Before I introduce you, actually, I'll let you introduce yourself. Before we get there, let me say what the heck is going on, okay? There is the future of media is exactly what we're doing here. This is you and your voice, and you watching. Currently, the way the ecosystem in media is that if you're under 35, no one's going to a website, whether it's political news, tech news, no one. The first thing you're doing, you're opening up the news feed. You probably heard me say this before, and I'll say it again. And that's what we're going to be. We're putting video content, which the algorithms encourages. One, because it has more dwell time, and then they artificially give it a boost, especially with X and LinkedIn right now. And what we're doing is we're bringing that content in English about the Israel tech ecosystem to the world. This is media. This is the future of media. Israel Tech is the media now. And now our goal is to be able to go forward in a way that's transparent, honest, and not backroom deals in order to promote certain people and certain companies, rather those that are interested. If you're interested in being a host like I am for This Week in Israel Tech, I only have so many hours in the day. I'd be more than thrilled if someone wants to come and be a guest host too. It's because this is not my brand. This is the ecosystem's brand. We're democratizing the Israeli tech ecosystem and making it available for everyone. With that, my first guest for This Week in Israel Tech, and we're not weekly yet. Our goal is to go weekly starting Q2, with my first guinea pig, Tal. Tal from StageOne. What's up, my good friend? How are you?
So good to be here, y'all. Thanks for the time, and you're super excited to be here for the first. I think you're absolutely spot on. I think as I'm consuming most of my media now in live and videos, it just makes a great move to this form of media as well.
Yeah, and there's more transparency and honesty, and you guys know this isn't edited. So, like, if we say something stupid or brilliant, you know that it was organic. So that's the good news. All right, so let's talk. There's a few things that we said we wanted to talk about. We definitely want to cover. Today is the inauguration of the Trump Vance. What does that mean for the tech ecosystem? There's a lot there, especially if you know the vice president was a partner out of VCs. He's very much involved in global tech. We'll talk about that. We're definitely obviously going to talk about the elephant in the room, AI, and then we're also definitely going to talk about VC and cyber and other things that may come up. And when you want to ask any questions, we're taking questions via LinkedIn and X. So feel free to go ahead and ask them. All right, so let's start. Why don't you kick off? Tal, tell us a good introduction about you. Who is StageOne? What exactly are you guys doing? And yeah, tell me what's up.
For sure. So, Yoel, thanks again for having me, especially on this inauguration this week in Israel Tech. So, Tal, born and raised in Israel. I've been running StageOne for about a decade now. I'll talk about StageOne in a sec, but we focus on enterprise early stage investments. Before StageOne, I spent time with Cisco running their M&A investment team in Israel. Before that, a few years in the US, including business school, and way before everything, I was a Tal graduate, and I spent about a decade in the Israeli army, mainly like cyber stuff. Here in StageOne, we invest, as I mentioned, early stage, typically first money in, anything from small checks like $100,000 to $200,000 all the way up to $6-7 million. And then we invest only in Israeli entrepreneurs that solve very large problems in the enterprise space, B2B.
How do you define very large problem?
Yeah, so it will typically be a market that is in the billions, and customers that are willing to pay from 10,000s to 100,000s to even millions on every like an average contract value. So we have companies today that have their customers paying them $1 million per instant, in a sense, which is great to see. I mean, those same companies started with $100 per customer. So companies that can grow to this scale are companies that are really interesting for us.
Amazing. So let's jump in. Today, Donald Trump gets inaugurated. Okay, Donald Trump and JD Vance as vice president. Let's try to stay away from the politics as much as we could. Let's just talk about what that means for the tech ecosystem. To kind of go back a little bit of, I'll set the stage of, right, I'm a total economics nerd. People may not know this. It's October 7th and I kind of stopped talking about it. But what is going on right now is that starting from May 2022, almost 3 years ago, 2.5 years ago, we felt there was a big change in recession, inflation, and this caused a lot of challenges for startups. One was that the cash they had in the bank was suddenly worth like 10% less, so bought them less. And then, of course, everyone then want everything costs more. So you expect your talent needs to potentially start to cost more. Your burn rate is now burning. And then these VCs had this challenge. What do I do? Do I further invest and try to save my current startups and companies and help them? Do I go ahead and more try to find new companies to bring in? Because there was, let's just say, a form of economic crisis in the VC area. And so maybe you want to speak to a little bit what those challenges were like then, and then we'll talk about how we expect things to change economically when it comes to not just
Yeah.
regulation, inflation, and how that plays a part for the greater tech VC world and in Israel in particular.
Yeah. So you cover a ton of ground, and there has been such a massive change since 2021. So I will start even a step before. 2020, 2021, the beginning of COVID, everybody at the beginning was super scared. And then we got to like the zero interest rate period where everybody was super happy. Money was flowing everywhere. Every day you had 5 new unicorns. You had tons of cash to pay everyone, and basically the party was full on. The music was running. Company were doing SPACs, but then as life happens, the music stopped, and the music stopped because these things can't work forever. And in a sense, I'm kind of happy that we all had a chance to view this really sharp incline to happy times, and then unfortunately the fall down after that, because the moment before that we were surrounded with investors and tech people that only saw great times and never saw what it means to be in a inflationary period, in raising interest. So the change in 2022 was actually hard for most, but was in a sense an educational experience for many people. And you realize that, hey, it's true that I raised a ton of money and I've done a bunch of things, but guess what? I can actually do probably the same with less money and be a little more efficient and drive my companies to success with staying minded on my expenses and the way I run my companies. And we got to a period where really, the survival of the fittest, people that were capitalized but also very smart in the way they manage their business, were able to continue to drive results. And unfortunately, the ones at the bottom of the pack could not do that. And we've witnessed in 22, 23, and 24 the unfortunate decline of those that could not fit in. And many of them, the ones that survived a little more, is because mainly they had more money and they could extend the period of their survival. But I think we're now at a point, and this is why we are personally very excited at StageOne for 2025, where the strongest companies have survived. Capital is really focused on the best performing companies, and people understand that building a real company takes a toll, and it's harder to do so. And we've went through this momentum, and in come Trump, a new administration coming in, a bunch of regulation that was enforced by the Biden administration, including the most recent AI regulation. Trump's come in, and all of you know him very well. You've seen his videos. He's full on. He doesn't waste time. He started, sending those announcements before, but he also got this hive of very talented people surrounding him, from J.D. Vance and Trump and others. And at the end of the day, he's trying to do new things. He's surrounding himself with this tech hive from the West Coast. Both, I think, to have this appearance of I'm new, I'm tech, I'm going to change things around, but also, frankly, because many of those people are very smart, and hopefully they can drive a change, and he's going to get the credit. And I think people around him know that you can fool him once, but on the second time you're going to be kicked out. So you better align to his policies. And I think he already announced the reversal of a bunch of those regulations. However, on the flip side, he's very big in announcements and not always fully delivered once he realized the full impact of those. So I'll give you one concrete example. He was talking about the tariffs to China and to Canada and to Mexico, and at the end of the day, the bill is going to come, and the U.S. population is going to suffer if those tariffs come in. And I think he's doing this balancing act of sending out this like test balloon to see how people react to this, and then he's going to draw back and realize what he wants to do.
Great. So let's talk about those regulations, kind of like, so first we had a party and now we're hungover for the last 2.5 years. Is another way of putting it. But really, there's obviously a lot of printing from the American side for the inflation that really kills people. What were the regulations that Biden put into place that Trump is rolling back that will help the tech ecosystem?
Yeah, so I think there were a bunch of regulations coming in, but I think the biggest and probably the most challenging ones are the one that came in late January. I think it was January 13, where Biden basically said he's going to enforce restrictions on the sale of AI chips, and those restrictions are going to be divided across the how good of a friend you are to the U.S. And basically, there are three buckets. The first bucket is the U.S., its closest allies, and some European countries. By the way, within this bucket, you also have the companies that are generating or creating those AI chips, like Taiwan, because you want to have them as close to you as you can. The second bucket is essentially everybody else, aside from the third bucket, which is in a sense hostile countries that the administration does not want to have any access to AI chips. So Israel is in the second bucket, which is not as good as the first bucket. It's not as bad as
Weren't
the
we in the
third.
first bucket? Yeah, we were, and then Biden, right before he left, removed Israel, right?
Yeah, so I wasn't in the Oval Office when they made the decision on that. Unfortunately, I
You
think
weren't? Well,
I
is that
was.
why I'm happy
I
you
did.
won?
I mean, I spent a lot of time over there, but this specific relation was out of my reach. And I think at the end of the day, I think the challenge is that when you think about those three buckets, uh, your access to AI chips are restricted by the bucket. So first bucket, essentially no restriction almost at all. The only restriction is about 50% of the compute power needs to stay in the US. So you can buy AI chips and you basically can buy as much as you want, but they will need to stay in the US. At least 50% of them. The second is a bucket where you have those tariffs where you can only get that many AI chips. And the third bucket is that you don't get AI chips. Now, I mean, not all of us are fully aware of what's the need for AI chips. What is those AI chips? What do you need them, and what do you need them close? At the end of the day, maybe if this works, I can spend a minute of just think about the framework and infrastructure, how it works.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why don't you tell us?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't think people know what that means, like these advanced chips, right? I mean,
Yeah.
not to get too geopolitical, but like the whole thing about Taiwan and China is largely based on the advanced chips that supply 92% of the West with all of our advanced chips, the chips that are in the missiles, rockets, airplanes, tanks, literally everything militarily and supercomputers and everything. The Biden administration decided to, on its way out, cut Israel out. Basically, where you get a military and everything like Russia. That's what the U.S.
Yeah.
administration under Biden just did.
I
Is
mean,
that going to be reversed?
say again.
Is the Trump administration going to reverse that?
So that's a good question. I think at the end of the day, the supply of AI chips is important in two folds. One of them is on teaching your models, perfecting your AI machine, and making sure it's the best model out there. And this is a very lengthy process. It takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of resources. And it's where there is just a ton of compute power spent, both in terms of power and money and just getting those chips. And then the second piece is what's called inference. Once you have the model active and you want to ask the AI model, okay, so is this a cat or is this a dog? And there you have another chip for this. And you mentioned the chips in the missiles and the chips in the different defense um, equipment. At the end of the day, these are mainly the inference chips that are usually a little maybe weaker. They're very machine focused. They're very mission focused. Excuse me. So they need to do one thing but really well. They need to go and take whatever input they have and perfect the model and execution of this. And then the basically the teaching or the model teaching phase is the most expensive one. Is Trump going to change it? That's a good question. I mean, I think Trump on one hand really likes free economy and likes to um, push the markets to be open and for capitalism to grow. But on the flip side, he doesn't like some of the countries on the East, and this way he's imposing those tariffs. I think he views China as a big threat, and at the end of the day, collaborating with China is something that he sees as almost as a competition, where there's some things we can collaborate and many things are a competition. I mean, take TikTok for example. TikTok was banned yesterday, and Trump overruled this today. So there was a day of darkness of TikTok. I don't know how many people left on that day, but Trump was already saying he's gonna overrule this. Is this the right policy? Is this wrong policy? I think this was more of Biden said this, so I'm going to do the exact opposite, versus maybe it's smart to ban TikTok from the U.S. Population, but only time will tell. Some people claim, and this could be often the fringe right, that TikTok is like a weapon for the Chinese public.
Chinese party, yeah. Well, it is. If you read the terms of service, it is. I did a live on it. People talking about B2B marketing, TikTok, when it was like all hot 4 years ago. I'll find it. And it was like, oh yeah, we should use the rates. And I'm like, guys, stay away from this thing. Same reason you shouldn't get a Chinese phone or a Chinese car. And but let's move away
it's just to be controversial this for a second. It's probably 90% of the things you use have Chinese component in them, whether you like it or not.
Yes, correct. But there's a difference between Chinese component and being able to listen. Even after you uninstall the app, if one of the terms, it is actually recording you audio and when you type, even if you want to install it, if it was ever on the app. That's on the terms. Joe Rogan read it. It's pretty crazy. Yeah. People think like it's conspired, like you could watch it being read on podcast. People actually pull it up and read it. It's pretty crazy what's going to happen. But we'll have to probably divest, or we just it can't stay as is. And it's making people stupid. Let's talk about what policies. Let's just talk about economics straight up, right? Obviously, inflation ideally will be addressed, so burn rate will startups burn rate will last longer. How long until we can probably maybe start to see a rebound in the VC and the startup world? Because obviously things take time. Now with the optimism, investors might invest into a fund, and then the VC takes that fund, and by the time they distribute it. And then how long are we talking about of a cycle here to get this back up and running to restore the economy in the tech ecosystem?
Yeah, it's a great question. And if I knew the perfect answer, I'll put my bets on it. We, from our experience, witness those cycles almost on an 8-year basis, from really the bottom to the top. Sometimes it was 6 years, sometimes it was 10 years. We think, but again, I'm talking about the bottom to the top. So I think we're already starting to see the change. I mean, if the bottom was 22, maybe the end of 21 where things really collapse. Think about it, we're already 4 years in, so we're almost halfway from 21 to what we think could be recovery around 29. I think that the biggest recovery would actually start this year, next year, and 27. We're already seeing a pipeline, for example, of IPOs coming in. So there were close to 0 IPOs of tech companies this year, which is unbelievable because it went down.
This year, you mean 2024, last year?
Yes, excuse me, for 2024. It came down from, I think at the peak we were like at 70 or 80, and now this has really slowed down, and it slowed down because everything collapsed. It takes a long time to build this pipeline again.
There were also regulations that were anti-M&A and anti-IPO, right?
So I think some of it was, and at the end of the day,
we'll wait it out, right?
What again?
So people just wait it out, right?
Yeah. So everybody's sitting on the sideline. So I just get the data. 21 had 124 IPOs, 22 had 2, 23 6, 24 8. Sorry, 9. So at the end of the day,
the last few years. Wow.
Yeah. So you moved from 124 over 1 year to 17 over 3 years. Almost 90% decline for the 3 years. We're talking about more than that for 1 year. And it's not that those companies went away. So you have a bunch of really great companies sitting on the sideline and waiting to see when the market's going to open. think about it, there were a couple of IPOs that already were quite successful in 24, like Reddit and Rubik, and you do see that the market is coming back up, but the bar is still really, really low. What we've seen in 21 is that the bar actually basically went to zero. You could have a company with no revenue, like a 1000x multiple, almost no cash in the bank, but a great story and maybe a great growth story over very minimal revenue. And this company will go and be IPO'd for 1, 5, 10 billion. Now, the threshold today is that you need last 12 months of about 200, maybe 300 million in revenue. You need to see 30 to 40% growth year over year. You need to see really clear path for profitability in the future. You're probably not going to see IPOs, smaller than 2, 3 billion. And you really need to be consistent because the public markets like to see this consistent in those companies. So you have those great companies. You have companies that are gearing up for this. And also you have the next class of companies in the, let's say, 50 to $100 million revenue. Let's say next year, maybe the year after, I'm going to hit 150, 200, 250, and then I'm going to go IPO. And this is like everything is going to converge really nicely. It's like the markets are going to pull up. We're going to be ready with our numbers, and we're gonna be ready for the IPO at that time.
Awesome. Thanks for your comment, Andrew. There's some other. If someone leaves the comment, you're welcome to. Maybe we'll share it or a question.
Yeah.
So where does these? So it's going to take at least a year to really start to rebound, is what you're saying, which really sucks. I'm sorry to hear that. But that's at least good news, and we'll see more M&As and IPOs. Do you think now that with AI, let's bring in AI from a VC perspective in a sense. One of the fascinating things with economy and inflation at the timing it did is that AI started to kick up into real gear. So not just obviously your cash is worth less, your burn rate is now shortened, but now the problem is that if you were a more advanced company around VC and you put all this work into coding and engineering, suddenly that value in the market is worth much less, and now the competition can close the gap much faster, right? Let's play this forward. Those companies that have invested a lot of money into development costs and things like that can now be done maybe for 10 or 15% of the resources.
Yeah.
How are those companies going to go moving forward? Where's the return on investment on that? And then how does that change the way we look at investments going forward?
Yeah, again, really appreciate the question. It's something we all debate and spend a lot of time thinking about these days. So let me start, a little backward. And AI was here before. AI has been around. It used to be called machine learning. You had like those ML experts, and we sold an conversational AI company in 2021 to McDonald's, a company called Apprente. That we sold to McDonald's to do conversational AI, what you do today with Alexa, with Google Assistant, and back then McDonald's was using this to do their drive-throughs, and they were able to execute higher efficiency on that. So it was here before, and the way we look at AI, and that's going to impact the way we look at different companies, is we look at this at 3 tiers. The first tier is like the infrastructure, from the chips that we've discussed before to the building those large meaningful models, to getting the right software in place, and basically getting the infrastructure ready. These companies are usually very, very expensive. Training those big models is just an enormous amount of money. And in Israel we have I think A21, but it's not very common to see those. It's like the Claude and OpenAI. These are the giants that have the billions in revenue in investments. Frankly, I think it's going to be very hard to catch up with those guys. The only opening here might be a new world that's now called the small models, of creating AI models that are very specific and very small, very focused, and we can talk about this in a second. The second piece is companies that are doing what we call AI ecosystem, or basically the tooling for AI. And that could be companies in the AI lifecycle management, in the model repositories. We sold a company called Quack to JFrog that is solely focused on this. They do not develop a model, they do not develop an application, they just help people that want to develop AI. And we have other companies in that space in our portfolio. And then the third piece of companies are companies that are developing applications on top of those models. And that could be everything you know, but these are people that are not reinventing the wheel. They're not creating the new OpenAI. They say, I mean, a perfect example is another company of our portfolio, is Second Nature. They help train salespeople. And from the get-go, they say, we're not going to build our model. We're going to do fine-tuning on the existing models, but building our own model is something we're not built to do. However, we can create this enterprise-grade, super relevant application for salespeople to make sure that they train and operate well. And when you look just after the horizon, you can see how this becomes a new salesperson. How if I know how to train people, I can be the salespeople, and I can start selling on myself. And it could start with smaller application and grow to big application and sophisticated sales. And frankly, one of their gimmicks they had a tool that helps VC practice their pitch. And I was trying this. I went to their website and I tried my VC pitch on StageOne on their system, and you get this feedback on how good you're of a salesperson, and it's super nice to see that. So within those three buckets, I think each one of them is going to be impacted very differently. I think the first bucket of the large models, these guys are full speed ahead. I can easily see a world where there are going to be few models, but not too many, and people are going to use them. And you can see how they keep on using and adding new features to those models. The second piece, I think there is just a great growth in that space, and there's also a ton of opportunities for Israeli companies. We're super great in infrastructure. We're great in dev tools and DevOps. One of our companies, CoreLogix, just bought a company in that space, so they're already acquisition in that space. A company that is focused on monitoring AI, which is probably going to be a future problem for everyone. So CoreLogix has been stepping ahead of this. And the last bucket is also very relevant. If you can differentiate and take the model and bring something of your own to the table on top of the model, you can actually create great value that people like. And we see this in fintech, we see this in operations, in IT, and obviously we see a ton of this in cyber as well.
Amazing. So let's get into the cyber and VC world. First off, I want to ask you a question. Something that comes in conversation with clients. You mentioned, by the way, a couple of our clients. I don't know if you know Second Nature, we do their SEO, and also another company we do some marketing that I'm not going to talk right now, because it's influencer marketing. But the AI, can you be a tech company going forward without AI at its core? I was speaking with a client, and Dream Security, and they were saying, they go, we're not a cyber company, we're an AI company with cyber, with like cyber on top. It got me thinking, if you're a med tech company without AI, you're no longer a med tech company. What was a great med tech company 5 years ago without AI is just not relevant in 2 years from now, right? Or even today.
Yeah.
That goes for fintech, for everything. I mean, just being able to move faster, smarter, better, etc. This can all help.
Yeah. So I think you're spot on. I mean, we're in an era where AI is almost everywhere, and frankly, not having AI in your tech stack is probably something that's going to hurt you. Not in terms of the storytelling, but also in terms of just your capability to execute well, because other people are using this, and other people are going to take the leap forward because they're using AI. You mentioned healthcare. Theodore, our company, is using AI for vision to help non-invasive operations. This is big. I mean, they've been doing this for a few years now, but think about the surgeon a moment before, and now he has this like AI power helping him, saying, "Hey, you should watch out. You're actually going the wrong way." And I mean, this is life-saving. And I think at the end of the day, we can love the machine or not love the machine, but they're helping us and they're here, and we should harness the power. And again, there are industries where we see this very often, but you can almost, if you zoom out, you can see how industry by industry, AI is coming in and helping. And this is everything from like very, very, very deep tech to very, very low tech. Like you mentioned, we talked about defense a moment ago. There are just a ton of AI in defense. Before defense was like bombs and you know explosive, and there is that AI in everything. You can look at the think about teaching, how AI is coming into teaching, how it helps teachers provide adaptive learning curve for different students. Think about fintech. Um, think about like a typical day in your life. How many things are now getting more and more powered with AI? I will go back to the Superman quote with big power comes is Spider-Man, big power comes big responsibility. I think we're hitting a point, we're getting closer to that, where we need to really think how is this going to have a negative impact as well.
I
I
saw in
personally,
the
yep,
Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry. I interrupted
no,
you.
I'll just say I personally don't think that the change in workforce is a negative impact. I think we've seen those waves of technology changing workforce, from the Industrial Revolution to tech to information and now to AI, really changing the workforce. But I don't think that's going to be the change. I think the change could be, AI getting a little more independent.
Amazing. So I saw actually with AI, it's finding this fascinating. Just people understand it. You know, Andrew, the American drone defense
Yeah.
company. Okay, cool. So they were over the LA fires. They were able to spot where the fire was spreading, at what pace, where it would be most effective for them to drop water over, and in order to stop the spread at the best pace. So just to get an idea of AI, just to be able to update this kind of software in the air, what it should look for, and to learn and just being able to have to see how fast the fires are moving for the first few days and where they're moving, and taking the winds into account and all these things. They now have enough data points that they can literally hover over and know where to drop water to have the most effect, to be the most effective to minimize the spread of fire, which I just thought is like another amazing another amazing opportunity. Really, it's unbelievable.
Yeah,
Uh,
I totally relate to this, and I'll say, when I was reading about Andrew, which I think is amazing, um, is I was unfortunately my first memory took me back to Cyberdyne from like Terminator and the Skynet, and obviously it's very different, and Andrew is it's a private company and he has very strict regulation, but who knows where the future is going to take us. I think Andrew is very proud in creating those autonomous AI capabilities, and I think it's super important for the safety of our nations. Um, but fast forward 10, 15 years, I don't know where we're going to be. I'm not saying take your helmets and dig the bunker, but I think uh, it is interesting to see where this goes. And also, I'll say about Andrew, I personally am super excited about the new opportunities in, I'll say, privatizing some of the defense industries. I think
let's talk
defense,
about that. Why is
yeah,
that? Why is that important? And because I think that's something, in a sense, Israel has always been very good with working with startups in the private industry and bringing them into the defense and right using that technology in defense. America less so because they have special interests of the, I hate to use a cliche term, military industrial complex, where they're all right. They're almost part of the government in a sense. How are we going to see more of that? And then, are we worried from a defense perspective that these companies could be corrupted or their information could be stolen? Or do you think proper regulations is enough to ensure to get the benefits of the private industry without having maybe the potential risk of not having as much control if it was run by the government?
yeah, yeah, super relevant question. It's also because times are changing really rapidly. I remember, as I mentioned, I spent a decade in the army, and many of my friends from Talpiot went to serve in I'll say, the civilian military and defense industries like Rafael and Israel Airline Industries, and they were basically doing this, but I'll say, on a mixed civilian government environment. And what happened in the last 5, 10 years is that many of the tech VCs and the tech entrepreneurs realize there is an opening in defense, and this area hasn't been covered that well. And I think to see how people are taking some of their concepts and way of thinking from the private markets and entrepreneurship, like Elon Musk doing with SpaceX, and taking this to the defense and government side, I think is nothing short of impressive. And
We
we've
have a
seen this.
question on X. Oh, sorry, I didn't know you were continuing. That was the
No, no,
connection.
I was just we've seen those waves before. When Lockheed Martin was established, I listened to the Acquired podcast on Lockheed Martin to see to hear the first years over there. The story just amazing. But if you draw the similarities to what Elon is doing with SpaceX and what those people are doing with Enduring now, it's just impressive to see how people are still building those large, interesting companies. Go ahead.
Yeah, yeah. There aren't that many people though. I think one of the main components, I think this might be Israel's biggest challenge in the technology when it comes to defense tech, is that we're very good and been spent a lot of time on software and cyber, and the future is hardware. And I know we're not going to probably get into this today, but like AI is software. Israel might be able to lead there. Hardware is quantum machines, quantum mechanics, right? Yeah. And so how do we get in there, right? When you talk Anduril, it's a software plus the drones are hardware, right? SpaceX, hardware in a sense, right? Of course, there's the technology and the software involved, but at the end of the day, when it comes to manufacturing and building, that seems to be our greatest challenge. What do you think? Do you think,
Yeah,
does Israel
you know,
have a
you know, I
manufacturing? I interviewed the CEO of UBQ Materials. I asked him similar questions and other people, and I don't know. I feel like I never get a satisfactory answer. Maybe because people are scared to speak with such conviction.
yes. So the jump between hardware, it's almost like a leapfrog between software and hardware. There are new chips coming out, and there's a ton of technologies that are building on those chips and taking everything further. And then you're starting to get strained by the hardware. So there is a new version coming up, and then there is software catching up. And you can see this in many. I mean, you can see this in the x86 processors with Intel back in the days. You can see it with the compute power on AWS with Amazon, where there's software coming up and then there's new chips coming in. So this dance between hardware and software is always going to continue. You mentioned quantum. I think quantum is the next frontier. Frankly, though, I think it's like at least 5-7 years out. I think what you're going to see in the next 2-3 years, and we have a company that is building a quantum machine, a real computer, a company called Quantum Art, a bunch of like super smart people from the Weizmann Institute and other places teaming up together to build a real quantum computer. Everybody knows it's going to take a few years, and everybody knows there is a big ecosystem around this. So you're building the hardware, we're building the operating system, we're building the software on top of this, we're building the error correction, we're building the compiler. There are going to be many moving pieces in this, but frankly, having all of this tied together is what's going to create 5, 7, 10 years from now a new ecosystem, and that's going to be a huge jump forward in compute power. There are things that this will be groundbreaking change. There are things that are going to be smaller impact, but the hardware changes are very meaningful. I actually think if I take this to the Israeli angle, we traditionally and still love to make those hardware investments. We think there are just a ton of talent here. It doesn't mean that our companies are building factories and that are there are people in the manufacturing line tweaking things. Many of this production is going to happen in the East, in Taiwan, Hong Kong, and even China. But the design is still here. And you also see the large multinational doing this here. I mean, Apple, they have a huge site here. These are all electrical engineering, most of them. Intel, same thing. Broadcom, same thing.
Very fascinating. And then, so how are the VC, since you're saying it's like 5 years out, right? A few years out, how is the VC industry responding to something, the technology that we're still learning about that we know is definitely is coming, it's going to be a game changer, but it takes so much freaking investment. How does like, how does that compute in the decisions you're making strategically as a VC?
Yeah. You're absolutely spot on. I mean, we managed today about $500 million across a few funds. But we, as a very early stage, inception stage investor, like to keep our funds small. Our biggest seed fund is 150, and we have opportunity funds to follow on, and we have smaller funds and bigger funds. But at the end of the day, Quantum Art is going to raise, if everything works well, hundreds of millions of dollars. And this is why we need to get this robust VC ecosystem back in play here in Israel. Because for those companies to be successful, and you see some of those bigger names in the US that are maybe a step ahead in terms of financing, you will need to have, at the end of the day, billions of dollars pull into this. And frankly, I think we're resilient, and I think we do have this ecosystem here. And this is both local funds helping to build this from here in Israel, but also, and I'm happy to see this, and this, going back, we didn't discuss the war at all, but in the last 6 months, we've seen the return of the large US VCs to Israel. They're coming back here. They're back into making new investments, and we love it. We think, we think it's super important for our ecosystem. We think it's crucial to see those VC coming in, mainly because some of them are just have bigger pockets. We don't want to see the craziness of 2020 and 2021, but we do want to see this ecosystem back flourishing. And I think we have good signs that this is coming back, but it's still out there.
We have a question from X by Rabbi Josh Uter. So you got Rabbi, that's a question only because you mentioned the war. Can you track, does the hostage deal have any kind of impact on VC funding and kind of what's going on in your ecosystem, these kind of things, or even the agreement or return of terrorism or the pessimism of the future of the security, so maybe it's not already invested in Israel? Just how does that play?
Yeah, so I think personally that people, especially around finance, appreciate stability. At the end of the day, you would like to see the markets as stable as they are, with as minimum outside interference, and basically let people work. And I mean, we've been going through a year and 2 months, 3 months of hell in Israel, and we're hoping to see the light at the end of the tunnel. And from a very strict financial VC perspective, those deals are very important. They're bringing back peace. They're bringing our hostages back that we all super care about and want to see them home. And to be honest, maybe it's based on my years in the army. I'm sure that the IDF and the Shabak and other organization will know to continue to protect Israel, even with a deal in place. And I think that the positive impact of the deal is so big from in every aspect of our lives that at the end of the day, I'm very positive of this. And we just want to go back to creating and driving innovation. We want to see all those people back in their homes, obviously the hostages, but also the reserve duty that we should be super thankful for what they've been doing for us in the last 470, 80 days almost. So this stability is going to drive the economy forward, and you're already starting to see the impact on a 1-day basis. Obviously, it doesn't mean that much, but then it will create and will drive the impact. You see the dollar is going down, so hopefully things are going to get better and more stable.
Yeah, I hope so too. I'm optimistic in general. That's kind of just my nature. So let's move on to cyber. We got about 15 minutes left. I want to make sure we're done by that. Cyber and VCs, right?
Yeah.
Something people have been talking about forever. Has things changed? How has the cybersecurity industry changed? In conversation with someone, they were saying that, in a sense, that there's reached we're approaching a saturation point for the different industries, niches, and opportunities for cyber to protect enterprises and companies. And so it's not that, we had a bubble and it came down, rather we were closing the gap and now we're finding equilibrium. What are your thoughts on a comment like that? And then what is, in general, how does cybersecurity when it comes to VCs different from the other technology companies you invest in?
Yeah. So I'll say, it's a super interesting and relevant area, because when you look at the last decade or so, cyber in Israel has always been on the uprise. Like, we've seen cybersecurity companies growing and becoming successful almost continuously through the good times and the bad times. And I think it's a great testament to the capabilities and the human talent that we have here, to see those companies grow and succeed. And we're now seeing the second wave of successful companies that are creating, massive companies. Obviously, Wiz is a great example, but even on the smaller scale, I mean, in our portfolio, Silverfort is close to 1 billion, selling at tens of millions of dollars every year. This is a large, meaningful cybersecurity companies that are selling, to hundreds and thousands of customers. So it's great to see how the ecosystem are really matured to be in a position where we are building strong foundational cybersecurity companies. However, on the flip side, and this is what maybe sometimes keeps us at night, everybody wants to be in cyber today. On a typical year, we see about 700 companies, maybe 750. These are inception stage companies, or companies that are starting, which is just an
Just
enormous
in
amount.
Israel, or you mean globally?
It's globally, but I would say it's probably 80%, 90% in Israel, because
Right.
we only
Well,
look
how is it how are 80% of the cyber companies that are starting coming out of Israel? It's kind of
Yeah,
crazy.
so I think we're in an ecosystem. We're in a situation where people open the newspaper, people check their live videos and see everybody talks about cyber. Well, I should build my own cyber companies. And we're seeing a wave today, which is super interesting, a wave of cybersecurity experts, including CISOs in their organizations, leaving their companies and starting their own cybersecurity practices. And and that's huge. I mean, people are leaving the stability of their day-to-day, I would maybe corporate job, because some of them are working in corporates, and are leaving this behind to start their own companies. And I think it's impressive, but it's also scary, because there are just many, many companies in that space.
Yeah, there are really a lot of companies there. It's very exciting. So, but is the way you're investing in cyber and the way you approach it different from other industries?
Yeah, so we look at, to be honest, we look at cyber a bit differently. We think cyber is needs to have a little higher threshold when you're making investments, because the competition is fierce, because there are many, in almost any space that we view, we see high competition. We also unfortunately don't see enough differentiation. So we would see 5 companies doing almost the same, and I think that's not good enough. Uh, we see uh, we see companies that are addressing problems that are not impactful enough. So when we look at cyber, we really spend a lot of time understanding differentiation, understanding how strong the teams are, and understanding what's going to be the end impact of those companies. Is it going to be $1 billion company?
Ahmed has an interesting question to VC. Do you think defense tech ecosystem would reach to investments from outside Israel, like UAE VCs, for example? So, what kind of with Abraham Accords, and hopefully with the new administration, we'll see more peace in the neighborhood. God willing, God willing. What are the collaborations looking like between you, UAE, and other Abraham Accord countries? And
Yeah,
while I'm at it, I'll add to Ahmed's question. If God willing, there's normalization and peace deal with Saudi Arabia, they don't have the tech ecosystem, but boy, do they have cash. How would you? What are your thoughts there, just as a VC? Are you guys looking there? Or other VCs are? I'm talking about in Israel specifically.
yes. So I think maybe I'll start with the facts. There has been a steady flow of investments from UAE own companies both around defense, but not necessarily just defense in Israel. Obviously from the Abraham Accord, but some of it was actually before the Abraham Accord in different other ways. But I think there's been a great collaboration.
Can you touch on that just like very quickly? What do you like? How do they do it? Like, what are these? Are these shell corps that are set up in, I don't know,
No,
Turkey or
so
another
I think
country?
before it was mainly around, I'll say third-party countries that were not Israel
Right.
or UAE. But I think today, when everything is streamlined, most of the larger organizations I'll say the money managers in the Gulf and specifically UAE have people here on the ground looking for innovation and to drive investments for them. And frankly, this is not always front page plastered on the news, which I think is great. I think it's interesting, to see how these guys operate, not necessarily just by the news and the PR, but there have been investment from those areas. We have a company in the defense space called Ramon Space. They are doing chips and compute and storage equipment to be launched into space with all the hazards out there. We have been in discussions with investors all around the globe, including the UAE and others. So this communication is existing, and frankly, I think there is a small portion of defense where you say this has to be only Israeli or only US, but there is just so much more that can be open for collaboration, both in funding, but also, in R&D and in pilots. I think some of the companies in the Gulf, especially UAE and Saudi Arabia, I've mentioned, are facing some of the threats that we are facing from countries that are eager to destabilize the region, and we have common interests, and we should drive forward with those common interests.
And so, what do you think that's going to be? I mean, that's a very generic answer and part of it. But do you think is StageOne speaking to UAE counterparts, Abraham Accord counterparts since the Abraham Accords came into effect 5.5 years ago?
Yeah, so slightly similar. I was in Dubai just after the Abraham Accord were signed to start establishing relationship with the people on the ground over there. I think there is great interest to collaborate. To be honest, we haven't yet realized any investments or any investment into our funds or into our companies, but it's definitely an area we're looking into. I mentioned Ramon as an example. We have companies that are going there on the ground and talking to investors. Hopefully this will come soon.
Amazing. So you'll get investors in there. And do they have VCs there kind of set up and all that ready to make investments into tech abroad that are now expanding to Israel? Like maybe not. So they might have been investing in the United States or maybe Europe. And now they're like, okay, and now that we can invest in Israel directly, are we seeing a lot of maybe their funds now not specifically allocated to Israel, but maybe they might take some of their funds and say, hey, there's some opportunities here?
Yeah, so post the signing of the Abraham Accord, we've actually seen many UAE financial institutions investing in Israeli VCs. I think the next step is what you've mentioned, of having a UAE VCs investing in Israel. I know of a few, but I think this ecosystem is yet to be as prolific as what we see with the US and Israeli one. I think a piece of it is access and finding the right strategy and stage. I think it makes great sense to come a bit later in the process where your company is already a little more mature and they're ready to be to be deploying in larger scale and maybe have larger investments in place. Because at the earliest stage, like the seed and the A's and the B's, you really need people on the ground here. But I could easily see this coming, and I think that's a potential great source for collaboration.
Amazing. So maybe if I can just recap, and then we'll start to land. And I'm going to play some settings here just so I can learn. So if it's me making changes, I'm just trying to see how this stuff works. I like that one better. They don't have the ecosystem, UAE, just yet to have VCs that can invest in Israel, generally speaking. they don't have the startup tech ecosystem just yet for Israeli VCs really to invest there. What is happening is Israeli VCs that are investing in Israeli tech and other tech, those funds you're now able to reach out to investors in the UAE for your funds. Did I understand that correctly?
Yes, and this is already happening in, I'll say, in like good scale already.
Okay, terrific, great.
Yeah.
Before we end, is there anything else you want to share about you, StageOne, or anything else that you're doing?
No, yeah, I mean, first, thanks again for hosting me. This has been really interesting, and hopefully, we're able to provide some insights to the people listening to us. I think at the end of the day, the Israeli ecosystem of startup is really striving, and we've weathered the last year and a half of the war, and we're really picking up. And us at StageOne, we are just super excited what the new future brings. Continue to support early stage companies and stage A companies, but also see our more mature portfolio growing. And I think we're in like a super interesting times right now, and there's just a ton ahead. So excited to see what's happening in the future.
Awesome, man. How can people stay up to date with you, StageOne? Anything else? Thank you, Jonathan. Yeah.
No, I think that's about it. I think again appreciate the time and looking forward to our next one.
Amazing. My name is Yoel Israel, and I'm the founder and the host of Israel Tech, and we're looking to expand and democratize Israel Tech, the brand. So if you'd like to be involved and find a way to elevate, we're also looking for sponsors, and we're expanding what we're doing. Please go ahead and send me a DM, or you can reach out to info@israeltech.com. Tal, StageOne, thank you for everything you're doing for our ecosystem. We're blessed to have you here, and thanks for being our guinea pig, our premier guest. We'll be learning.
My big pleasure. It was fun. Thanks for the time.
Thanks, Tal.